Today's episode of Socially Democratic is presented to you by Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a progressive campaign agency that specialises in campaigning and community organising. We work with non-profit and community-based organisations, trade unions, progressive businesses and social democratic parties across the globe. Dunn develops community engagement and organising strategies to win campaigns both big and small, and we help leaders craft their own public narrative that tells a story that unites people and moves them to act together. And we also train engagement staff, volunteers and organisers in leadership and power building. And if you want to create change in your community, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. And today's episode is brought to you by Morris Blackburn Lawyers. Morris Blackburn have a Melbourne-based opportunity for an experienced social media and communications professional to support their marketing and employment and industrial relations law teams. If you are highly creative, a technical specialist with strong stakeholder and relationship management skills, then Morris Blackburn want to hear from you. The campaigns and communications specialist is responsible for executing the social media content plan, largely supporting the employment and industrial law team, but will also have exposure to other areas of the firm. The successful candidate will develop and implement content that will drive traffic and engagement to Morris Blackburn's practice areas to ensure that the practices remains a leading voice on social media. This is a great job opportunity and will ideally suit an established progressive campaigner looking for a new opportunity in a great professional environment. To find out more, just go to morrisblackburn.com.au/careers. That's morrisblackburn.com.au/careers. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by SwiftFox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust. The lists are up to date. Phone banks that can change minds, emails that drive donations, events that will energise the community both online and offline, and text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners, and to find out more, you can go to their website, which is swiftfoxcrm.com, to win your next campaign. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly centre-left politics and organising podcast that drops every Friday, that dives into the progressive campaigns of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. And as you know, this is December, and this is when we do our yearly wrap or year in review. We've already done, what have we done? We've done the federal politics one, we've done the international one, and now we're going to do our traditional, just before Christmas, our state politics wrap, or our state politics year in review. I can't remember the name of the podcast. But anyway, it's always with Harriet Shing, who's the member for the Eastern region in Victoria's Upper House, and she's also the Minister for Water and the Minister for Housing and the Minister for Equality. So Harriet is back on the show this year to wrap up Victorian state politics. So looking forward to that conversation with her, as always. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favourite podcast. And if you like the show, please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And for all the updates, follow Dunn Street on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. All right, let's get to today's episode. Okay, we're taping this one on a Tuesday on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. This is the final official episode of 2023. And as tradition has it, every year we end with a special guest to wrap up the year. It's meant to be a wrap up in state politics, and we do get to it eventually, but we tend to struggle at the start. But she's back for the 4th time, I think now.
It's probably about 18 or 19 times, I reckon.
Is the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Equality, the Minister for Regional Development, and the Minister...
No, not Minister for Regional Development.
Oh, have you lost that?
So I'm Water, Housing and Equality.
Yeah, my notes here says for Minister for Water and Water-Based Children's Toys. What's that?
Oh, no, so that's flotation devices, and that's technically a consumer affairs matter. But every now and then I do like to get on a hydrofoil and check it
I
out.
thought it'd be like super soakers and that kind of stuff as well.
Well,
water pistols.
Yeah, and then the antecedent market of the Nerf gun. There's a D mark there that you probably look into.
But I know, and you know her as Harriet Shing. Welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Now, I actually don't think I've actually spoken to you properly for 12 months. So how has the last 12
Do you
months
reckon
been?
it's been 12 months? It feels like time has sort of bent and stretched itself. So it's simultaneously about 2 weeks since we spoke and 31 years. So it's been such a whopper of a year. And there's been a lot of, I think, post-COVID exhaustion where people have started to get back into the new normal of routines. And they're simultaneously really tired. So, you know, state and federal politics goes on. Everyone's looking forward to a break. It's a time. It's Barbie Oppenheimer time is what it is.
Let's not bury the lead.
It's not.
And come to the first segment of today's podcast, which is called Donkey Update.
Oh, I love this. I love this segment.
I know you do.
I love this segment.
I've moved it up.
I
over the
suspect not really
years.
anyone
I was
else
like,
loves
when I
the segment as much as me.
Well, when I was writing the questions, I was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm just put the donkeys up front.
Yeah. I mean, you know that inevitably, if you don't, I'll just take us there anyway. Yeah. They're just the best. They're just the most helpful. Actually, they're not helpful at all. They do nothing. I think I've said this before. If you ever need a loaf of bread carried over rocky terrain, they're you guys. Other than that, it's basically the set of a Disney movie and a lot of early morning screaming. And if I get home late from Parliament, there's some late night screaming as well. So I have to tiptoe around the house. And there are whole Facebook communities dedicated to the art of evading your donkey's attention.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they recognise routine, which then means that if they feel that you haven't tended to their needs, like, you know, feeding them and letting them out and giving them love and attention in a timely manner, then they'll sing the song of their people, which is fine. But it's, as desert animals, they're able to send that noise for kilometres. And we've got great neighbours, but having said that, no, they're fantastic. But there is a point at which you find that you're sneaking around and not talking because you know that the donkeys will hear. It's like living with a couple of very small, adorable versions of Kathy Bates in Misery. You know,
they had this. I remember maybe a couple of years ago you talked about this sort of this competition that they did, or the way they ran around.
Oh, yeah. No, that was the Indy 500. Well, we've got a new situation now. I took out a big old spruce tree, and so there's this big bare patch of earth, and it's since become known as Donkey Mountain. And every afternoon it's like Iwo Jima. The basic kind of premise is you stand on Donkey Mountain and you fight your opponent in a system of rules that nobody knows about, and the winner gets to take the preferred path down Donkey Mountain and roll in the red soil at the bottom of it, and the vanquished one has to pick his way down to the grass.
Is this every
in a
afternoon?
very humiliating fashion? Just about every afternoon.
Oh, wow!
I don't know what it is. I don't know what it means.
Incredible.
Donkey politics, you know.
Yeah, just donkey politics. We also normally talk a bit about something Christmas related. I know we've definitely talked about Love Actually being a stalker film.
Do you know they're playing that with I think it's one of the major orchestras and the big screen, and it's being marketed as this sensory Yuletide delight, and I reckon that I would be begging to get out of there within the first 5 minutes because, yeah, you're right, it's a total stalker film.
Yeah. I think they're also doing that for The Holiday. Do you remember that film? Where
Cameron Diaz, is it?
It's like early days. It's like an entree to what ended up being Airbnb, because Cameron Diaz is sort of a hotshot Hollywood producer.
She's never played a role like that before. How interesting.
Segue.
Yeah.
The Anna Faris character in Lost in Translation is a adaptation or piss take of apparently Cameron Diaz. That's how she's regarded within the industry, and that was a bit of a kind of a to Cameron Diaz.
Oh, the sisterhood lives, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, because it's Sophia Coppola that wrote it, so she's come across her path and said, "I am going to put you in one of my movies."
Well, The Virgin Diaries and Lost in Translation, and There's a few themes coming through there.
Yeah. Anyway,
Walk it back.
Step back a couple. What were we talking about? The holiday. So that in that one, Cameron Diaz wants to get away from her life in LA, and maybe has broken up with her husband or a partner.
Again, a plot line I've never heard of in Hollywood.
Yep. True story.
Goes to an Alaskan town. No, wait, it's somewhere else.
Yeah. And then Kate Winslet is living in like a little
Has this got Judd?
cottage.
What's his name in it?
Judd Apatow?
Yes. No, not Judd Apatow. No,
Jude Law.
it's Jude Law. Yes.
So, Kate Winslet lives in a little cottage, sort of in a little kind of, in the home counties, but not in London.
Yes.
And her brother is Jude Law. And she also...
And her brother ends up with Cameron Diaz. Is that... Have I cut straight to the chase? Yeah.
Yes. So they somehow meet on some online thing where you can house swap for a period of time. So Kate Winslet, leaves a little cottage in Somerset and then goes all the way over to LA.
Accent?
That was my...
Yeah. Straight from Delhi, it sounded like.
Somerset. No, that's a...
No, it was good.
It's a good Cornish accent.
It was good.
And then don't make me do any more of it, though.
No, that's fine.
And then Cameron Diaz comes over to Somerset and stays in this little cottage. And so she meets Jude, who has a daughter, but his wife passed away. And they fall in love.
Oh, that's so Love Actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, can you imagine, though?
It's
All right, what
Christmas.
about a cast swap, though? Instead of Cameron Diaz, if you had Catherine Tate, and instead of Kate Winslet, if you had, like, Jennifer Saunders. Yeah.
Hang on a minute.
Curveball.
Wait a minute. Jennifer Saunders. Who's that again? Jennifer Saunders.
French and Saunders.
Oh, right.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
Movies would be made
Oh, yeah.
exponentially so much better if you could just do a straight swap of the major actors,
Yeah.
in a way that added a
And who would you
measure
get
of
to
something.
replace Jude Law? Because, I mean, Jude Law's good looking, and that was the sort of the...
Probably Will Ferrell.
Play,
It's taken a skew.
play
It's
someone
taken
who's
quite a
English.
skew. Yeah, exactly.
but not a very good accent.
No, that's right.
Bit
Well,
like my
he could do
Somerset
Cornish.
one.
He could do Cornish. So they're playing that to music, are they?
Yeah.
So I saw Blade Runner with the music performed live.
Okay, what is this like, this whole thing?
Okay, it was amazing. So
Right.
Ridley Scott's original,
Yeah.
and it was just amazing. They had the full score being performed live, and the film is on a big screen.
And the film's happening, so you're hearing the dialogue, right?
Yeah.
So how do they cut out the musical score from the film track to then hear the
Okay, so it's amazing. I was very interested in the mechanics of all of this. It being the minutiae that I'm
Because
generally interested
otherwise
in.
I just thought if they cheated
Okay.
and
No,
just
that's
did
right.
that.
The lip syncing, like
Milli Vanilli.
Yeah, Milli Vanilli. Britney Spears was accused of it at one point in time. No, it's they have. So the conductor is set up with the ensemble, and the film is playing on a little screen, and there are little pulses and beats for the bars, so that the musical score is timed perfectly as the orchestra plays it or the ensemble plays it.
Right.
And they know when to stop because the dialogue's kicking back in. But there are some noises and sounds in the film that that the group doesn't play. But it's the Vangelis soundtrack, so it's amazing.
So what about when there is dialogue and there's also a soundtrack in the background?
Keeps on going. If the ensemble's playing it, there's a little flash that comes up on the conductor's screen, like a little pulse.
Yeah.
And then they know to be conducting.
But they get the levels right? 'Cause
Yeah.
A live orchestra would be
very
quite
good.
loud.
Well, yeah, but you're in a really big space. This was at Hamer Hall.
Yeah.
And so the sound is really beautifully balanced.
Yes.
It's just amazing.
Because I've seen it advertised for, they've done, Star Wars, they've done Indiana Jones. They've
Yeah,
done
no,
some
don't worry about
Bond.
that. Don't worry about that.
And I've been...
Ridley Scott, it's Blade Runner. It's one of the best films of all time. And you think about AI and where it's all heading and the idea of consciousness, and, Philip K. Dick was just so far ahead of his time in terms of these, like the moral discussions and the issues of, of consciousness and sentience and responsibility and what it means to be human. Like, just amazing. And so I was sitting in this crowd, and it was, I've got to say, pretty specific demographic. There were lots of people with Blade Runner T-shirts on. Let's just put it that way.
What kind of age bracket are we
We're talking probably 45 to 55.
Okay. So peak Gen X.
86% men. And then, a couple of families who'd brought their kids along who were also in tiny little Blade Runner T-shirts. So it's a lifestyle. It's like owning donkeys, right?
Yeah.
You got to buy in.
Yeah.
Amazing though. I'd recommend if anyone's interested. I think they're doing another show or another couple in Sydney, but it goes around the world.
Yeah.
Just phenomenal. If you're gonna see any live performance of a score to a film, that's the one to see.
Or Blazing Saddles.
Or Blazing Saddles. Step Brothers is probably close there.
No, the other guys in that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, okay, interesting, because I wanted to talk about yacht rock, but there you go. You took us there. You started to have a bit of a philosophical conversation about Blade Runner.
Yeah, it's just amazing. So the book is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And it's basically just about the distinction between being human and being an android. And then you come out of it going, whoa, am I even here? It's one of those movies.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Shane McGowan passed away.
Yes.
And it's Christmas.
Yes.
And that means that Fairy Tale of New York gets played a lot. Were you a Pogues fan at all?
Yeah, I was.
I feel like you owned Doc Martens.
Yeah. I've still got Docs. When I was at school, I actually I had a part-time job at an ice creamery. It was I had a scooping arm like nobody else. Like if you extrapolate that, I should have been really good at sport.
Yeah.
Was not at all, but my scooping arm was second to none.
Yeah.
So I had this job at the Lilydale Great Australian Ice Creamery, and for my birthday in Year 9, I saved up the cost of one Doc Marten, and my parents gave me the cost of the other one. So because they were really expensive, right? And I wore those Docs every day to school from Year 9 until the end of Year 12. And every semester, one of the teachers would say, "They are not regulation shoes, Harriet." And I would say, "I need them for my feet." And the teacher would say, "Can we please have a letter from your doctor?" And I would say, "Of course, I will get that for you." And then I remember speech night in Year 12, one of the teachers coming up and saying, "We're never getting that note, are we?" And I said, no, definitively never getting that note. So I've always had Docs. Still got a pair now.
Were your school shoe Docs boot, or were they shoe?
You couldn't get away with a boot.
Yeah. Well, actually,
pushing the
it depends on what school you went to, really.
Yeah,
if it was a technical school, you could say,
I would have loved to wear a boot. No, they were a shoe. I've got
shoe.
boots and shoes.
Okay.
No, they're a solid, sturdy shoe.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I got my dad into them.
Right.
He wears a mixture of Crocs and Docs, which is interesting. He's subverting the dominant paradigm, bless.
Good name for a band. Shane McGowan.
Yes.
Did you shed a tear at the passing of Shane? Were you surprised that Shane was still alive when you heard?
I was actually, in the same way that I was surprised to hear that Barry Manilow had come out, because I actually just thought that everyone had always known that he's gay.
Yeah.
So I thought that Shane...
I missed that.
I think everybody did, because it was so uncontroversial. It was actually just the sense of the passing of an era. And that's, I don't know, I think maybe it's the time that we're in at the moment. I think there's been a mood of that around this year.
Mm.
Yeah.
Comes in threes as well.
Yeah, it does actually. It does.
Because we obviously had Henry Kissinger pass away.
Yes.
Someone said to me the other day that, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I was thinking then it must be the good that's going to go next, because...
Well, or no, see, I don't know who fits which category.
Well, obviously the bad is Henry Kissinger, and...
No, but you could be bad like Shane, as in,
Yeah, but Shane wasn't exactly a pitcher.
Well, it's looks aren't everything. Genius, genius has its attraction.
That is true.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about politics.
Yes.
Because we've done 16 minutes of just talking.
See, this is what happens every year, and I'm surprised that we actually do this at the end of the year, when, in fact, if you started this episode out at the start of the year, we could probably fill 22 episodes.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's something you can do.
You wouldn't be such a popular political podcast.
I know.
Yeah, we'd probably have to be classified under something like popular culture meets animal welfare meets random sartorial observations meets cooking tips meets, stupid substitutions of Cameron Diaz in movies.
Yeah,
for Catherine Tate.
There is one of our very, very loyal listeners. I won't name them because I don't want to embarrass them anyway, but they don't like this episode, and they've written to us to say that they just get on with the politics bit, would you, Stephen? You know.
Can I confess? It's me that writes that. It's weird writing about myself in the third person. No, that's not true. And to that person, I say, good for you. You know, go back and listen to one of the back episodes. They're well worth it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to underwhelm.
But to let her know, we are now about to begin the part that she's looking forward to.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you could always put up a comment when you post this that says, for people not interested in human interaction,
fast forward to the 17 minute
just kick
mark.
it into 17 minutes,
Yeah.
and you'll be peachy.
Yeah, good. Okay, let's go backwards.
Yes.
In terms of what we're going to do, we normally do a review of the year of Victorian state politics. A lot of things have actually happened, even though it's kind of been, when I think back on the year and think, oh, you know, what did actually happen? Like the year before, there was a Victorian state election. There was a lot of things that we could talk about in terms of the build-up to that. But this year, obviously, the long-standing Premier of Victoria and the leader of the Parliamentary Labor Party retired from public office. You are a member of the cabinet. You would have been in the room when he announced his resignation. What was your initial reactions when you first heard this news from Daniel Andrews?
I think, like everybody there and everyone more broadly, I was really surprised. I was really taken aback by the immediacy of it all. Obviously, it's not a decision that you come to lightly, that anyone would ever come to lightly, which meant that by the time we found out about it, it was a well-established and well-formed idea, of course. But it was, again, in that sense of change and, you know, the immediacy of everything, really, it was a jolt. And I can understand why, that a government of the longevity and of the depth and of the determination that that Daniel led achieved so much because of the sheer work that went into making everything come together in the way that it did. And that takes so much energy. And I can't even imagine how much energy and effort that takes after being the leader of the opposition and being a minister and being a party official. And I suspect that having gone through such a challenging 3 terms, or the start of a third term, with everything from, you know, significant physical injury through to a pandemic and bushfires and floods, that's been something that has of course taken a toll. So I think it wasn't as though it wasn't completely understandable, because of course it is. But it was a jolt.
When the history books are written on this government in many years from now, what do you think the legacy will be for the Andrews government period? I know they've still got plenty of time to do more great things under Jacinta, but in terms of the Andrews government era, what's the legacy, do you think?
I think infrastructure. I think that's been a defining feature of the work that's happened to date, and I think that's the sort of thing that changes suburbs and changes cities and accommodates growth and improves quality of life. That's one bit of it. And then I think overwhelmingly there's been a level of support for access to essential services and need being met. So health and hospital care, and we've had a mental health Royal Commission, we've had a family violence Royal Commission. We've accepted and worked on all of the recommendations from those commissions. I mean, the Family Violence Royal Commission came out with 227 recommendations. We're talking about billions of dollars of investment into the single biggest law and order issue in the state of Victoria. And adjacent to that, it's about reforming the court system, and it's about providing a whole range of supports to people in a time of extraordinary vulnerability. And then the mental health system, that again, a Royal Commission to address a broken system. And there's 74 recommendations from that. And we continue to implement those changes. And it's long-term work because it's about resourcing, and it's about workforce, and it's about the sort of systems that people engage with and how they engage with them. But then there's other stuff like, Breakfast Club and free TAFE and, even things like the power saving bonus. The fact that you can get a solar panel rebate, that you can get energy efficiency upgrades, the housing policies that we've announced, the housing statement. It all comes together. So there are huge infrastructure investments, Melbourne Metro and the tunnel work, the work we're doing with the other projects to deliver North East Link. Of course, the defining work around the level crossing removal projects, and then suburban rail loops. So it's about momentum and it's about infrastructure, but then it's also about the things that you can do around that are very much person and community centric, as well as accommodating the growth.
It's funny when you speak to people from outside the Victoria context, who are interested in politics and wonder about the success of the Andrews government. Particularly people from our northern states tend to think, you're all very left-wing down in Victoria. And the things that they hear about in terms of policy is around social policy, and they think that's all that ever happens. Whereas people from inside Victoria talk about the things you just mentioned before, about the big build and level crossing removals and freeways and tunnels and all that kind of stuff. But it kind of is... I guess the truth is in between. It's a balance of both, isn't it? And I think that's something that's been unique about this government, is it been able to strike both policy settings, both social and then sort of job creation infrastructure, right?
Yeah, I think one of the really important things for any government to recognise and to deliver on is that equilibrium between infrastructure and large-scale multi-billion-dollar investment, but then also on the importance of quality of life and the idea of equity that needs to underpin all of that. So the access to free 3 and 4-year-old kinder, for example, that's nation-leading stuff. And what it means is that not only does it mean that a family saving, around $2,500 a year per child, but it also means that in either a single parent household or in a double parent household, that you can then get someone back into the paid workforce, which helps with the cost of living. And when that happens because someone can access a free TAFE course and access, cut price registration or travel on the train system with more frequent services, or get from regional to Metro Melbourne on capped fares, that's the sort of thing that adds up. So it's not a one-shot wonder. And I think that the idea of good social policy has to be informed by, it's a jigsaw. It's whole of life consideration around opportunity. And I think we've also got a series of not wins but significant investments that are really mature. I mean, our housing work, the big housing build, that was 2020, and we are absolutely leading the nation. That means that the Commonwealth government's come on board to partner with us, and this is the sort of momentum that I think is really setting a good template for other states to follow. We get a lot done here, and it's really easy to sit over a border and perhaps to take a look at it and see only one particular element of social policy in action, for example. But you're right, living in the everyday, there are things across everyone's everyday that have been improved because of what's happened here since 2014. And it doesn't happen by accident. It is sheer hard work and careful work that means that this suite of initiatives across heavy infrastructure, but then also, in those programs has been brought to bear. And that's what it takes to make sure that it continues as well.
And overwhelmingly endorsed by the electorate on 3 separate occasions, which obviously the government increased its majority in the House of Representatives, in the lower house, the Assembly.
Yeah.
It is an endorsement, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And then also that hard work that continues between local members and government in terms, as far as getting stuff done, and the results that people can see and can experience. It's about making sure that we continue to do that work and do it without wavering. There is often a great temptation, I think, for governments to look to what a sugar hit might be, and this is long-term work. It's long-term work that continues to occupy every part of every day that we're in government.
Let's take a quick break to talk about SwiftFox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust. Lists that are up to date, absolutely. Phone banks that can change minds. Emails that drive donations, and events that will energise the community online and offline. And text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners. And to find out more, go to swiftfoxcrm.com to win your next campaign. Okay, let's get back to the show. Let's talk about long-term work. We've got a new Premier, Jacinta Allan. How has the transition been for the government under her new leadership? It's a weird thing that we have in our Westminster system that's different to the United States, that, you can actually do this. We can, if a Premier or a Prime Minister retires, then the caucus elects a new one and then they settle in, as opposed to what goes on in the States. It's not an easy thing to do though, right?
No, I think people were surprised by how effective the transition has proven for our next gear, our next chapter as a government. As a parliamentary party, the Premier has extraordinary support. She is respected, she is liked, she is accessible. People have known and worked with her for many, many years. She's always been a champion of women because she was the beneficiary of some really fantastic role models. She pays that forward in brilliant ways. She's regional, like Daniel growing up in Wangaratta. Jacinta's connection to Bendigo is one of her defining features. And she is fiercely authentic. And that's so rare in politics, that we see somebody who, after such a long period of time in an institution that almost through being around so much mahogany will tend to beat it out of you a little, she remains absolutely herself. What you see is absolutely what you get. So she's well liked from across the aisle and around the chambers, and more so that out in the real world. She's so warm that people naturally gravitate to her.
What noticeable differences have you seen in this transition to this new leadership?
We had a reshuffle of the cabinet, so
that's a pretty noticeable difference.
That's a pretty noticeable difference.
Someone's missing here.
Just little column A, little column B. So obviously the Premier, having been the Deputy Premier, we've got Ben Carroll now as the Deputy, welcoming Vicky Ward into the Cabinet, and a not insignificant reshuffle in terms of portfolio responsibilities. And that means that we can really continue with a lot of the work that has been partially fulfilled or is about, really bedding it down into the long term. We've got no shortage of things to do. So people are really busy but really well supported. There's a lot of work around careful collaboration. Taking the housing statement, for example, this idea of accommodating growth but then working across all parts of the private and the public and the not-for-profit sectors. We're talking about 6 ministers needing to be involved in all of that because it is so big that we need to make sure that we're doing it carefully from a range of different angles. And that's emblematic of the sort of collaboration that we have. There is a new children's portfolio, which is about bringing together the experience of young people, whether that's in the child protection system or through disability or early education and care. thinking about the way in which people engage with government, I think has really defined a lot of the decisions that the Premier's made, and people are really responding very well to that. I think the former Premier is missed. People know Daniel very well, have forged really, really deep connections with him. And he will always be a giant on the political landscape. Legacy discussions, I think, of every part of Australia. And Jacinta is, despite what some people might be wanting to characterise in her leadership, really forging her own path. She is not she's not Premier Daniel Andrews 2.0. She's Premier Jacinta Allan. She's doing an extraordinary job, and she's really, really very well regarded for the work that she's doing, and off the back of the work that she's done for a couple of decades now.
I was just going to say, like, a lot of the things that you talked about before in terms of the legacy of the Andrews government, particularly centred around the big build, I mean, that was primarily Jacinta's portfolios.
Yeah.
She's been the person who's been the driver behind a lot of that kind of stuff.
Well, she's also advocated, so fiercely for healthcare and for schools and for access to the sorts of supports that she knows are important. I mean, she's a mum she's got 2 kids. She's got a partner who is very occupied with making sure that that the house is running well, and he's amazing. But it's also then about making sure that the heavy infrastructure is linked up to the other parts of what it means to have a good community and a good life and good opportunities. But you're right, she's incredibly well acquainted with a lot of the work in whether it's level crossing removal or large scale infrastructure. I mean, the regional rail revival, she did that. We're talking billions of dollars to make sure that every line across regional Victoria, is either being upgraded or has been upgraded. And you add that into the work on suburban rail loop and the Cheltenham through to Box Hill, which is the first stage of that. It's about connecting the state, and she knows very well the work that goes into that. And it's nation-leading work, really. It's nation-building, nation-leading, nation-defining work that happens to be taking place in Victoria, and it's one of the reasons why we've got such low unemployment. It's one of the reasons why we've got such significant uptake in the trades, and you add that to free TAFE. We've got more than 80 courses on the free TAFE list here in Victoria. A lot of our ideas are being adopted by other states. They've been proven to work. They are working really well. We've got the SEC. Lily D'Ambrosio is making the most extraordinary results from the SEC and building a system of delivery of renewable energy that, again, is nation-setting. It's pace-setting stuff. So it does, it's all a long-winded answer, but it's all of these component parts need to come together, and they require dedication and hard work and goodwill from everyone that sits around the cabinet table. But as importantly, if not more importantly, members on the ground, MPs who are elected to make sure that communities are part of that decision making, are part of the work that sees change in their communities. Everyone has a role to play, and I think it's that dedication and that sheer force of will that's defining the Allan Labor government in the same way that it did the Andrews Labor government.
One of the things that's happened over a number of years, and you sort of touched on it earlier, is the amount of women that are involved in public office now in this particular parliament. And I think the other day, I saw on Twitter, there was a photo op that was done on the floor of the chamber.
Yes.
Commemorating, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's now more than 50% of the...
It is the whole parliament. Yes, that's right.
Was that both chambers?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So that's just one achievement. There's obviously a lot of, I've lost my words, yardstick achievement within the Labor Party caucus. The cabinet, for example, is 50% women represented.
More than 50%.
More than,
yep.
Obviously our Premier now happens to be a woman. So you're thinking, this is great, progress, things are going so well. And then within maybe a week of the Premier being sworn in, we have this Mark Knight cartoon. What did you think when you saw that?
I just thought it was actually really lame. It's so predictable that you would get the objectification of a woman with authority. It's not the first time. It won't be the last time. This is, again, not just about this particular cartoonist. It happens everywhere, and you only have to see, a small slot on Insiders that goes through the cartoons of a week to see that more often than not, women will be depicted in positions of either the bimbo or the matron, and near the twain shall meet. And I heard an attempt at a justification for that cartoon of a comparison to Tony Abbott, and how Tony Abbott had been depicted either in budgie smugglers or in the nude. And that's what he wore. Tony Abbott is infamous for wandering around in Speedos, and more power to him. Good luck. That's great. I've never seen the Premier of Victoria in anything close to the state depicted in that cartoon. It was just lame, and it wasn't insightful. It's another smash and grab dig, I think, that's pretty typical of various parts of the media. Again, where people are prepared to race to the bottom on how someone is depicted and to use really tired old tropes, then it's little wonder that membership and readership fades.
Remember the Aussie Post and Larry Pickering, the cartoonist? When I saw it, I was like, this was like shit in the 80s in a publication that no one read, that you could pick up at a truck stop. And this is in what is meant to be a major daily in Australia. It was just such a setback.
Yeah, it was a setback, but it was also laughable. Is this what makes it to what it purports to be a major newspaper? Is that what it takes to get into the pages of, what half a page? The message itself appeared to be all over the shop. The depiction itself was, I actually think it was more about the person who drew it than anything else. But having said that, not all cartoons are bad. Fred Bassett, for example, is a sensational comic, and it's I mean, I think we need to do better, not necessarily in terms of the cartoonists, but in observing just how much of a joke some of these depictions are, and not in a funny way. It's be better, do better. If you're going to make a political point, don't say that it's satire when it's just dumb.
Yeah, be clever. You mentioned before about the reshuffle, and you talked about housing. You've picked up housing.
Yes.
And this has been it's been a huge issue, but I feel like this year it's seen it kind of combined. But the issue has been elevated both on Main Street and on Spring Street. And I just want to get a sense from you about what are some of the positive stories thus far to come out of 2023 in terms of the housing space here in Victoria.
So the housing work that I'm doing covers social housing, and that's $5.3 billion as part of the big housing build, and that's about delivering 12,000 new social homes across the state. And
define social homes.
Yeah, so that's public housing and community housing.
And what's the difference between those two things?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. So if we were to listen to certain of our colleagues in the crossbench, they would say very different things to the description I'm about to give. Public housing is housing that is run by the government, and it is public housing, for example, in the walk-ups and the towers that people know in a very traditional archetypal sense. That's not the only place where public housing exists. It does exist around the state in a variety of different low and medium density dwellings.
23 Dunn Street, Warrigal, where my mum and dad first got their home.
Do you know what?
Commission housing?
Yes, absolutely. The commission housing that was built between wars and in really large volumes, again down the Latrobe Valley and all the way from there up to Pakenham, and then down through to Wonthaggi, for example. we've got community housing, and the community housing sector is a really, really important part of delivering on social housing. Community housing providers are those organisations that are set up in a not-for-profit sense. They are charitable organisations for the purpose of tax treatment. They often have mission-based approaches to the work that they do. A couple of examples, Winteringham, which is an organisation that provides housing for victim survivors of family violence. We've got the Aboriginal controlled housing organisations, obviously First Nations people providing housing to First Nations people. We've got veterans housing organisations. We've got multicultural housing organisations. We've got youth and young people. So there is a for-purpose element to this. We've got a number of organisations that also provide housing from 1 and 2 bedroom units and properties right through to 4 and 5 bedrooms for intergenerational, multi-faith, multicultural communities. And it's about wraparound services. So the difference in monetary terms is that within public housing, you'll pay about 25% of your income to public housing. In community housing, you'll pay between 25 and 30%, but you're eligible for the Commonwealth Rental Assistance Program. And there are very frequently those wraparound services that community housing providers deliver. Across the state, we're doing this in partnership. It's social housing. It is about making sure we're using every single part of the housing system to get new homes online, but also to make sure that we can build them in communities where people have called these places home for a really long time, and that we can do so in a really innovative way. So we've got a range of different ways of, leasing land over long periods of time. It's called the ground lease model. This is, again, it's another nation-first model of Homes Victoria land, which is then built upon and developed by a community housing provider. They'll actually, deliver many social housing units, community housing support, usually 1 and 2 bedrooms, but again, there are opportunities to have some flexibility there. And sometimes they will be in a community where there are other affordable homes that are being built or delivered, but then otherwise they might be a standalone, and they enter into a lease for say 30 or 40 years. They get a revenue stream from that through the rent, but then they also at the end of the lease period hand that all back to Homes Victoria. Right. So this is about making sure that land stays in public hands, and it's then also about making sure that we're increasing our housing stock. So it's a really ambitious target. It's achievable. We've got around 8,000 homes that have been brought online since the big housing bill was announced. We've added an extra $1 billion to it for rural and regional Victoria, and we're continuing to do that as part of the big housing, the housing statement, which, as people may know, was released a couple of weeks before Daniel Andrews announced his resignation, and that is massive. That's 80,000 homes a year for the next 10 years, and that's across all parts of the housing landscape. So private developments, affordable rent-to-build, build-to-rent, I should say, and it's been a long year, right back through to crisis accommodation. And so I work within the social housing space, and then also homelessness supports as well. Massive work. A couple of the housing ministers before me did a phenomenal job. We are redeveloping the 44 Towers sites. This is long-term work. We're talking, again, nation-building stuff. This is a 28-year project to redevelop those 44 tower sites. And they will go from a density, which is at the moment, it's about 10,000 people living across those sites. It will increase to about 30,000. And we need to do that because by 2050, we'll have a population the size of London. And so this is about making sure we do that, but that we also uplift social housing at the same time. So we're adding 10% to the stock that's there at the moment.
There is a criticism of a lot of things that comes out of the government in terms of the ambition and the size of these projects. Where are you going to get the builders from? How are you going to get all these houses online in that time? How do you respond to those kind of...
There's a pretty constant litany of criticism, and it's actually more important to hear people coming up with ideas and solutions and suggestions. And
right.
When we announced the housing statement, there was and is an affordability partnership, and this involves peak bodies, so the Property Council, the Master Builders Association, working across the super funds, for example, and making sure that we have buy-in from every part of the system. And that's also about looking at vacant government land. It's about easing the obstacles in planning approvals. When we announced that people will be able to build a granny flat, so you'll be able to build something of up to 60 square metres if you have a land size that's at least 300 square metres, and you can put that extra dwelling on, and you won't need a planning approval for that. You need a building permit because it has to be safe, obviously. I'm not saying you can't have an igloo, okay, as your second dwelling. But provided that you comply with building permit regulations, you can actually add an extra dwelling. And when you think about the knock-on impact, again, the jigsaw I was talking about earlier, if that then means that a young person can stay at home for longer and is therefore not at risk of rough sleeping or homelessness, or is otherwise not taking a rental house that is available therefore to someone else. It might be a key worker, it might be someone who's downsizing, or if it means that you can keep that for a parent who is staying, at home in an intergenerational household. That's really important. And there's a measure of pushback from certain councils who are opposed to any development whatsoever. That's inevitable. I think change is always hard for people, but the sprawl is not an option. Status quo isn't an option. We have to make sure that we are not just admiring problems, but finding ways through them. So, of course, it's ambitious, but it's also achievable.
Speaking of ambition and the critique of it, the suburban rail loop, it's in the media again this week. I noticed a couple of folks coming out saying they should scrap it. It's going to be over budget. Because I know that apparently there's a new contract about to be signed for the first part, which is from
Cheltenham to Box Hill.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And when I hear that, I just sort of think, where's the ambition from people? Like, as you said before, we're going to be a big city. And I think about cities like Tokyo, where they've managed to, it's the most populated metropolitan city on the planet. And if you've ever been to Tokyo, it works. It's not perfect, but they get people around. And one of the things is through public transport and these hubs. One of the things I love about the suburban rail loop, it's going to create these hubs all across the sort of outer ring of Melbourne. But there are still all these people out there saying, no, we need to pull the pin on it. What do you say about that?
That's what people said about the city loop. So you can almost go back and replicate word for word the objections that were raised when the city loop was first being designed and built to create, again, that orbital work around the centre of the city. We are in the position that we're in now, I think, because there's been an unwillingness to have that collaborative effort across all levels of government, but we've got an opportunity, which we're seizing, to do something about it. We need an orbital network. Because without that, and people who use the public transport system know only too well, you've got to head into the city before you can head out again. And the North East Link it's the same thing for the arterial road network. In building these projects, we're also putting precincts in and activity centres, and that's also where the housing statement comes in, these pilot plans for activity centres, where we engage with infrastructure and with suburban development and with planning and with housing, where we engage with open parks and space design, and we keep livability at the heart of all of this. We design the locations of our schools and our early learning centres, our TAFE campuses, and our sporting facilities. That's where you actually create that decentralised approach to design and to planning, and that's how you accommodate growth. Because, again, if people who are unable to access amenities and services are driving for 50 kilometres a day to get to a multi-gig, way of generating an income, right? If they're working 3 jobs and it's almost not enough to put petrol in the car to cover the trip in the first place. You can't access, a kinder or a school or a public transport network. We're not taking care of the whole community as we grow. And that's why projects like this are so important, because it's not just about what we're doing now, it's about what the state looks like in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time. This isn't about, me being around to cut the ribbon or the Premier or the former Premier. It's about saying that we are setting ourselves on a course to deliver something that will outlast all of us.
I don't know if this topic or issue falls under your portfolio in terms of being the Minister for Equality, but I just want to get your reflections on the fabric of Victorian society. I know that we pride ourselves as being this progressive state, but every now and then you kind of think, how progressive are we when we see Nazis marching down the main street of Ballarat? Or maybe a couple of months ago, they did something on some trains, speaking of public transport. Where are we going, in terms of the fabric of our society, when we have, people getting arrested for protesting, acts of environmental vandalism, but yet the Illinois Nazis can, march down Ballarat?
Well, firstly, there's only about 30 of them, and they just show up everywhere, and they're cowards. They're such cowards that they won't even show their faces.
Yeah.
And that's pretty typical, really. It brings to mind for me people sitting in their mum's basement with their computers until all hours on these kind
4chan. They're definitely on 4chan.
Definitely on 4chan. In these vacuums of confirmation bias. And I've seen that when I lived and studied overseas. You get these tiny groups of really vocal people who are seeking to create division and to spread hate. And we are so much more than that in Victoria. These people, they cause fear, and they create a sense of anxiety for a lot of people for all sorts of different reasons. And they ruined a really lovely day in Ballarat, for example. But that's not who we are. When we look at the multi-faith, multicultural communities that call Victoria home, we are one of the most inclusive communities on earth. We have huge diasporas. We have a melting pot. I hate that term. I really hate it. We have the most extraordinary collection of lived experience here. And we're so much better for it. And, whether it's Diwali or Ramadan or Christmas or Easter or Holy Festival, we have so many examples of people coming together to celebrate the things that we share in common, rather than, the things that people say make us different.
I forgot I was going to ask you after
Wow,
that.
I know that's. Well, I get really kind of, again, particularly because of the equality space, right, which is where you started on this question. The anti-vilification work that we're doing is really important, and we banned the Nazi salute, as people would know, and police are able now to prosecute for the Nazi salute or use of the swastika. Anti-vilification law consultations are being undertaken now, and within the equality space, I've had many roundtables and discussions and conversations with people from across LGBTIQA plus organisations, from the middle of Melbourne right out to the edges of the state. When we talk about vilification, it's often a hard thing to get your head around. People think of it in quite narrow terms. It is about people being persecuted for identity and specific characteristics or attributes. How you create a legal safeguard against that is an incredibly complex thing, though. And so we're working through it really carefully. One of the things that we've been really clear on, the Attorney General, Jacqueline Symes, has said on numerous occasions is we can't afford to get it wrong, because if it falls over at the first hurdle, then we haven't done the right thing by the people who deserve this protection, by everyone who deserves it. So we've got a lot of work that is in train, and we're looking forward to being able to put something to the Parliament in 2024. It's one piece, though, again, of the overall work that we need to do, because it's not just about the law. You can have the law as an element of deterrence and as a mechanism by which to prosecute or to bring an action or to enforce your rights. But you need to make sure that organisations are supported. And after the rally, the anti-trans rally, and that was attended by Nazis on the steps of Parliament, we provided $900,000 to 10 organisations who had had a huge upsurge in demand because of the transphobic and homophobic hatred that was just, being strewn all over the community. And so it's about operational funding and support. It's about cultural engagement. How do we make sure that people are able to access support and resources? And how do we also make sure that our spaces are safe? I mean, our librarians, for example, I love librarians, by the way. You will never hear me not take an opportunity to talk about how great they are. They literally changed lives. They changed my life. But when we talk about librarians who just want to create a safe place for kids to have story time or to be able to lend books out to people, and someone comes along and says, you shouldn't have that book in your library, you shouldn't have that story time here, we're going to ring in a threat, and therefore out of a risk assessment process, that event doesn't go ahead, or the existence of that book in a library is called into question. That's the sort of thing that cowards like to peddle in seeking to make people either ashamed or invisible, people with those attributes, with our attributes. And you might be someone from a multicultural background, you might be a member of our LGBTIQA plus communities, you might be Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, you might be someone living with disability. We have to make sure that we're sending really clear messages to say this is absolutely unacceptable, that we're providing the legal levers for the fact that is unacceptable to be enforced, but that we're also providing support to communities and really backing up that wonderful acceptance and inclusion that so many of us know to be a very Victorian thing.
What strikes me is who has the energy. There's the cultural wars that have been propagated by Sky After Dark and sections within the Liberal Party and all, these nut jobs marching down the streets of Ballarat. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, why are you so animated about this sort of stuff? There are so many challenges going on in our community right now that needs addressing. Why have you picked that one that you want to get motivated about?
Because I think people get fixated, and we saw this in the States, right? We've seen people galvanise around any number of different strange theories simply because they're disaffected or because there is something in their lives that is missing, or that they lack a fundamental sense of dignity or self-worth around the idea that they could be included. And so the response to that is to lash out. It's like the whole incel, involuntarily celibate movement that says, I hate women because women deny me the opportunity to prove myself a man, therefore I'm going to go out of my way to treat women badly. It's
so
one species of it. Yeah, exactly. And it's once you get into this vortex of confirmation bias, you find people who think the same way who won't ever challenge that, and it's down the rabbit hole stuff. And we only had to see what happened with the anti-vax movement to see that it attracted people from a whole range of different parts of the conspiracy theory landscape. People who were talking about chemtrails and people who were talking about sovereign states, and it's wild. But you can map out a whole range of reasons that disaffected people come together over a specific cause, and where the messaging around that cause is broad enough to attract people to others that they see as being, of the same mind. That's why you'll see people marching down Burke Street who have nothing in common other than the fact that they're angry or they're disaffected or they're missing something or they're longing for something, and they don't really know how to go about improving their opportunities or accessing connection.
Speaking of a group that's longing for something, that is to try and win an election for once, the Liberal Party. I
haven't seen them march down Burke Street for quite some time. There's not that many of them, though, so maybe I've missed it.
How's their year been, do you reckon?
I'd probably say fraught. I think it's been a pretty textured environment for Liberal Party politics. On the one hand, at a federal level, we see Peter Dutton's obviously engaged on a brand revival. He's had some form of consultant obviously come in and work out how to make him into Uncle Peter or whatever it is that the messaging is now. And so he's doing that in a way that I think he's intended to resonate with the good people of Queensland and parts of New South Wales or Western Australia or anywhere but Victoria, basically.
Although I think he does think he can sort of connect with this sort of outer suburban, what he would think would be disenchantment towards Labor.
Well, do you remember he went around and said you can't even go out for dinner in Melbourne without being set upon by African gangs?
I do.
Let's not forget that. This is that guy.
Yeah. Which then led to one of the greatest moments of Australian politics when Christopher Pyne was asked about it.
Yes. He said he quite liked it. He quite likes going out for dinner in Melbourne.
Yeah, and he went, the what? The gangs?
Yes.
Oh, yes, the gangs.
I forgot all about the gangs. That's right. And then in the Victorian Liberal Party, they're so riven. They are just absolutely splitting in all sorts of different ways. And I think it's as much as anything because they don't know quite what they stand for in a sense that looks to me to be an intergenerational crossroads, because the idea of free will on the one hand and this J.S. Mill kind of approach to thinking about liberalism is being tested very, very significantly by what it means to embrace a conservative perspective on everything. And that conservative outlook is really defined by to my mind, a lot of marginalising of specific parts of our communities. And we saw the expulsion of a member of the Liberal Party earlier this year who's moved to the crossbench. There's a defamation action. We've seen change in the Liberal Party leadership team. Obviously, Tim Smith has left so that the Jaguars of Victoria don't have to be quite so concerned as they may have been. And there's a new member for QIN who represents perhaps a modern face of the Liberal Party, but simultaneously Dr. Matthew Bark, who was in the upper house, widely considered to be smart and measured and collegiate, has gone. And you look at the turnover. We've got a member for Warrandyte who, again, I think will fit into a conservative part of the party. I don't think the Liberal Party knows where it's going or what it stands for. And I think that's increasingly evident in the way that it makes policy decisions, the way that its party room conversations happen. I think anywhere you get a transcription of what's happening in internal party meetings, it's not so much about the transcription, it's about the fact that someone has seen fit to air the content of all of that meeting to the outside world. I don't know where they're going to go. I'm not sure they know. And I think that there's a sense that I get that they think that opposition is just about opposing things. They don't come up with anything that doesn't just admire the problem. And I think that people are actually tired of that. Time will tell.
We had two by-elections, state by-elections this year. The one you mentioned before, Warrandyte, in which the Liberal Party ran uncontested and won.
Did they not call it a great victory or something?
They did. They did. I likened it to you getting really excited about winning an intra-club match in pre-season when you've been playing against your own team and you're like, yes, jag the victory.
It's like that time I beat myself at totem tennis.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's about the only sport. Actually, maybe that's what my ice cream scooping form led me to back in year 9. Bit of totem tennis. That's about it. Yeah, and then Mulgrave, obviously the by-election there. Yeah.
And they don't know whether they came second or third.
No, well, it looks like they came third, doesn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, behind Ian Cook. I think he's got more litigation in the works now. I'll leave him to pursue that. Yes, there's a really interesting element of this that is about what some might say to be abject denial. I don't know. I'm really so delighted for Eden Foster, though. She is absolutely brilliant. When I was out and about talking with people as part of door knocking campaigns, the level of enthusiasm for her, she's so well known. She is so admired and respected. She served as the mayor. She's been a local through and through for forever. And she represents such a wonderful new chapter for the seat of Mulgrave. We were so delighted to welcome her into caucus. The cheers and the standing ovation went on for longer than your average. What was the thing that you talked about earlier? Interim football match.
Pre-season intra-club.
See, this shows that I still know absolutely. How long have we been doing this now? I still know absolutely nothing about what you've just said. But she's so great, and she's absolutely determined, in the same vein that everybody else is, to represent her community. In a way that she's already done, but to make sure that she is a really accessible leader as well.
Nice way to end the year on a high, particularly for the caucus. Now, I'm going to throw you on the spot here, but we do this. I think I do this every year. I always ask you to nominate like a social democrat of the year or someone in the community that you want to just lift up that's done some great work. So I want to end the podcast and end the year indeed on a high.
Okay. Before I do that, I just want to acknowledge Peter Murphy, who passed away after living with cancer for a number of years, a federal parliamentarian in the seat of Dunkley. Peter was extraordinary, and when I say living with cancer, that's exactly what she did. She lived strong and fierce, and she was articulate and inclusive. She was such a wonderful leader, and she walked with people in everything that she did. And there is a lot of grief and a lot of time being spent now by people who are honouring her memory. And she did an awful lot in her time in federal Parliament. She found out not long after she was elected that she'd been diagnosed with cancer, and she worked to see things through on online gambling reform and on the sort of work that was about inclusion through the House committees that she sat on. So much love to her family and to her friends and everyone who is grieving her passing. She was the best of us. And has paved a wonderful path for others to follow in, particularly young women and particularly people across the labour movement. And she was loved from all parts of the political spectrum.
Huge loss. Amazing person, and just absolutely brilliant and extremely funny. Just ridiculously funny human being.
So I think in terms of a social democrat who I think is particularly wonderful, is it wrong that I'm still thinking about RBG after all this time?
Don't. Far be it for me to judge. This is your show. It's
sorry,
your award,
it's not my show. But I mean, I'd have to kind of give a shout out to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and again, we've seen it's 15 years since the right to access abortion was made law here in Victoria, and so I was thinking about this today around the work that Ruth Bader Ginsburg did to identify the importance of systems being better to accommodate women, and the work she did in anti-discrimination law, and the fact that she single-handedly held women's rights aloft as part of a Supreme Court in the States that was always heading toward a particular place. And so when I think about what's happening across the states now and the challenges that so many women are having in accessing healthcare or getting crisis support after assaults and violence and sexual violence. And I hope that anyone listening to this who is finding this troubling can talk to someone. The number for Lifeline is 13 11 14. But RBG did the most extraordinary work, and she sat on a bench. She sat amongst men. She blazed a trail that has meant that countless women have become leaders and remain leaders and will create other leaders in turn. And that is something that I keep thinking about. But it's also about the contribution that people right across our communities do as well. And there are names of people in our communities who leave lives better having gotten involved in them, who create change for people whose names they'll never know. And isn't that what this is all about? It's the idea of contribution, really, isn't it? I mean, that's the social democratic principle at play. That's what we're here for.
Lovely way to end, as always, Harriet. Thank you so much for coming on the show again. It's been too long since I've seen you. I hope you have a great festive break.
Thank you. I'm about to head over, hopefully, to some snow and wandering around some Christmas markets. Looking forward to being back in January. But I hope that you have a great break and take care. I hope all your listeners, except for that one who doesn't like this episode, I hope you all have a great break too and find time to connect with people after it's a really tough year for all sorts of reasons. I've got to say it, take care on the roads, give yourself extra time, take a break. The SES people are out with, they have cups of tea. They have the take 5, tea vans, basically. Amazing. Check it out.
And to all of our listeners who have stuck with us through 2023, thank you so much for listening to the show and supporting the show and telling your friends that they should listen to the show. We've had a great year. We've done 52 episodes. We want to thank our sponsors, Morris Blackburn and Swift Fox and Dunn Street. We also want to thank all of our guests that have come on, some repeating, some new, some won't ever come back, no joking. And also want to thank our producer, Rebecca Connell, who does all of the work that makes this show work every week. She books the guests, she organises does all the research. She produces, edits it, gets rid of all of my stupid questions, and then punches it out for you to listen, and then obviously helps promote it on all of our various social media platforms. So once again, I want to thank Rebecca for her dedicated work in 2023. We'll be back again in 2024 with a whole series of new episodes. So thanks very much.
Just a gratuitous plug here for you, because you're not going to say it. The top-rated political podcast in Australia.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Captain Bashful won't put his
I don't know how the ratings work.
Put his kudos out there. I don't know. I suspect there's someone out there. It's like Standard & Poor's or Moody's where you get a rating.
I thought about creating our own awards and giving some.
You should.
Yeah, do that.
A giant trophy and a packet of gummy bears or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Harriet, great to see you again. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely lovely to join you. Thank you.
Hey there. Thanks for listening to Socially Democratic. Did you like the podcast? Hit the follow or subscribe button and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. And to get all the latest updates on Socially Democratic, follow Dunn Street on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn. And we'll see you next Friday. Today's episode of Socially Democratic was brought to you by Morris Blackburn Lawyers. Morris Blackburn Lawyers have spent more than a century paving the hard path to justice for everyday Australians, and they've helped over 500,000 Australians turn their situation around, and they know how the system works. Their experience and skills means that you'll get the best results possible. To find out more, go to their website, morrisblackburn.com.au. Morris Blackburn, experience you can count on. Socially Democratic was brought to you by Swift Fox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust, lists that are up to date, phone banks that can change minds, emails that drive donations, events that will energise the community online and offline, and text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners. To find out more, go to swiftfoxcrm.com to win your next campaign.